Hi everyone, welcome to this co-production of WION and Voice of America. I'm Susan Tehrani coming to you live from New York City. Let's go straight into our first story, where immigration is one of the top issues for U.S. voters this November as they decide who will occupy the White House. The difference in policy between the two presidential candidates is stark. VOA senior Washington correspondent Caroline Presutti begins our story at a dusty desert stop in Arizona.
This was a gold mining town, the richest strike in the state of Arizona at the time.
Now a ghost town. Patty Burris lives here with Beano, her 38-year-old donkey.
Patty, there you go.
Burris says she's tired of undocumented migrants sneaking across her land from the Mexican border. Former President Donald Trump gets her vote.
He's going to deport them. Yes, I am all for that. Absolutely. Get them out of here. And he can do it. He knows how.
While President Donald Trump ordered that a 740-kilometer wall be built at the U.S. southwestern border. This is the Arizona part of it. On his first day in office, Joe Biden paused any new construction.
We could have had it completed in 3 weeks. But
Donald Trump returned to an Arizona border wall last Thursday, although the Washington Post reports this section he visited was built before he became president.
Because there's never been a border in the whole world that's leaked like this border, with all those millions and millions of criminals coming through.
Democratic voters at their convention say their party is more tolerant.
Immigrants, we belong, the neighbors, we take care of each other. That's really what it's all about.
If elected, Vice President Kamala Harris promises a path to citizenship and the return of a bipartisan immigration bill that died in Congress.
The Border Patrol endorsed it. But Donald Trump believes a border deal would hurt his campaign. So he ordered his allies in Congress to kill the deal.
Back at the ghost town. So Harris would not control the border as much.
Don't believe a word she says. Where's she been in the last 4 years?
Nobody stops by the old deserted town much anymore. Burris says she'd like to go back to the time when she saw more tourists come through than migrants. Caroline Presutti, VOA News, Pierce, Arizona.
Joining us now live with additional reporting is VOA's Jessica Stone. She's live at the White House for us. Hi, Jessica. We've seen public sentiment swing on the topic of immigration under President Biden's administration. How does that factor into this crucial campaign issue?
Well, it's interesting. We took a deep dive into this, and the public is swinging in response to what the current immigration policy is. Let me give you an example. So after 4 years of Trump's tough talk on immigration, the border wall, the Muslim ban, U.S. public opinion actually swung against those policies to such an extent that a Gallup poll showed that 34% of Americans favored an increase in immigration as opposed to 28% against. Fast forward 4 years, going into the 2024 election, the polling looks different. Now we've got 55% of Americans wanting restrictions on immigration as opposed to 28% 4 years ago. And a Democracy Fund report shows that more Americans than ever are now interested in this issue of immigration. They're aware of it, they're concerned about it, and certainly more than they were in 2020. But there's also this issue of cost projections for Trump's proposed mass deportations. He wants to mass deport at least 1 million undocumented workers. We already saw the cost for just 114,000 or 140,000 people in the 2023 budget. That was a cost of $420 million for transportation and deportation of those migrants. Remember, too, we have an estimated 11 million undocumented workers in this country, so it could come at an incredible cost to deport all of them. Susan?
And there was an important decision in court in a Biden administration immigration policy this week. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so back in June, you may remember there were a couple of executive orders related to immigration from the Biden White House. That was basically because there wasn't any work and forward momentum behind immigration policy, as you heard in that piece from Carolyn Presutti. This allowed legal status to go to undocumented migrants, or immigrants, I should say, who are married to a U.S. citizen. This was an executive order. It got challenged in court. The argument from the Biden administration was that this promotes family unity. 500,000 spouses of U.S. citizens would be impacted, and this gives a path to citizenship without leaving the country or risking deportation. Well, on Monday, a federal judge in Texas blocked that policy for 14 days. He says he might extend the program, but the court challenge was filed on behalf of 16 Republican-led states and governors. Former Trump immigration czar Stephen Miller supported that challenge, and right now it is not going through. So that program for 500,000 spouses of legal U.S. citizens not moving forward at this hour.
Okay, Jessica, please do stay with us for a moment while we go to a story by your colleague Anita Powell. Critics of the hardline regime in Afghanistan say that 3 years of Taliban rule has brought misery upon the nation's girls and women. Both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris this week marked the third anniversary of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. But advocates want to see Washington push harder against the horrific human rights violations there. VOA White House correspondent Anita Powell reports from Washington.
The Taliban want this to be the picture of their 3 years of rule in Afghanistan. But this is a realer picture. Parwana Malik was sold into marriage shortly after American forces withdrew 3 years ago this week. She was 9 years old. She is not an exception. Local media has reported on girls as young as 7 or 8 being married off to Taliban officials. Parwana was photographed for the nonprofit Too Young to Wed. Stephanie Sinclair is its founder.
What the Taliban is doing to women and girls is absolutely a crime against humanity. And Afghan girls and women inside the country are really suffering.
President Joe Biden issued a statement on the anniversary honoring the service members who died during the withdrawal and defending the pullout. Vice President Kamala Harris issued a similar statement. Like Biden, she did not mention girls and women, though as a lawyer seeking her nation's top job, she is a living repudiation of the Taliban's edict that girls cannot be schooled past 6th grade. Republican presidential challenger Donald Trump also focused on the deaths of 13 American service members in criticizing the Biden administration's pullout.
Caused by Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, the humiliation in Afghanistan set off the collapse of American credibility and respect all around the world.
Earlier this month, at an event marking the anniversary, this Taliban official gave a defiant speech criticizing foreign interference. Women, including journalists, were barred from the event. The regime recently passed a law restricting women's movements and requiring them to cover their bodies and silence their voices in public. The United Nations called the law egregious and demanded its repeal. The exiled leader of Afghanistan's top resistance movement argues that trampling the human rights of half the population is bad policy and bad politics.
They do not represent the will of the population. Afghanistan's youth, especially young girls, have dreams and aspirations no different from their peers around the globe.
On this anniversary, photographer Sinclair urged American leaders to focus not on the men in charge, but on the voices they have silenced, and to impose harsher consequences for it. And now, a plot twist. Too Young to Wed persuaded Parwana's elderly husband to return her to her family. She's back where she belongs, Sinclair says, in school.
She's quite the character. She has a lot of, big opinions, and she wants to be a teacher or a doctor. She wants to do something, and she's got the power to do it. The problem is she's not living in a society that is permitting it.
But as she nears the 6th grade, she carries a burden of knowing that unless something changes, her time is running short. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.
VOA's Jessica Stone is still with us from the White House. Jessica, as we saw in Anita's story, both U.S. presidential candidates weighed in on the anniversary of the Afghan withdrawal this week. How is the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan playing out politically on the campaign trail?
Yeah, it's an important question, and we've seen a disparate approach by each of the campaigns. On her part, Vice President Harris pretty much avoids talking about the war in Afghanistan in great specifics. Trump, on the other hand, pretty much only focuses on the last month, that terrible botched withdrawal, and blames the Biden-Harris administration for that withdrawal. We have to keep in mind that Vice President Harris has previously stated that she was, quote, the last person in the room when the decision to evacuate with President Biden was made. And Republicans are using video of that statement against her in campaign commercials and in campaign tactics. But the reality here is that this is a decision that took place over multiple administrations. In 2016, the Trump administration signed the peace agreement with the Taliban that set all of this in motion. He has, of course, campaigned against involvement in foreign wars, and he still is. He doesn't talk about that, really, just only that last month and how it was executed. He claims he would have done it differently, but we haven't seen how he would do it, so we simply don't know.
And what do military veterans think about all of this? Does this part of the voting population make a significant difference in election outcomes generally?
So overall, it's not a high percentage of Americans that have served in the U.S. military, but in critical swing states, I just want to give you some percentages about the numbers of people who have served in the military or who are active duty military. And in these critical states that can essentially decide the U.S. presidential election in November, this is where they could make a difference. Nevada, 8% veterans. Pennsylvania, 7% veterans. Georgia, 9% veterans. Arizona, 10% veterans. So in close elections, that population, depending on which way they go, could really make an impact on the results. Now, for the first time in 2 decades, both of these tickets have a military veteran on them. The vice president in both camps has a military experience. The Marines for J.D. Vance on the Republican side, the Army for Tim Walz on the Democratic side. Historically, vets have voted more Republican, but we have also seen that change in the recent years. We saw a 2020 poll, for example, from the Military Times, which shows that there is a decline in favorable views on Trump and higher preference for Biden. Meantime, the Democratic Party has made special efforts to reach out to the veteran community. They have, in their party platform that was passed last week, they increased benefits for military veterans. The Republican Party took a different approach. Their speakers blamed Biden for the withdrawal from Afghanistan, focused quite a bit on that, and accused Vice Presidential candidate Tim Walz, who, as I said, did serve in the Army, of leaving before a deployment to run for Congress. It's important to point out, though, that military experts are split over how Walz has characterized his departure during his campaigns. Back to you, Susan.
Yeah, definitely on that point. Jessica, thank you so much for all of that. Happy Labor Day weekend. And I hope you enjoy the end of summer. I can't believe it's already here.
Exactly.
The bill faces significant criticism. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.